The laughter at table 7 was the kind that came from men who had never been told no in their entire lives. It was loud, obnoxious, and carried across the entire restaurant like a disease, infecting the air with casual cruelty disguised as humour. Marcus Thornton, tech billionaire and CEO of Thornton Industries, sat at the centre of the table like a king on his throne, holding court with 6 of his wealthiest friends. They were all there for the same reason they came every Tuesday night to the Sterling Room, to drink expensive wine, eat expensive food, and most importantly, to remind themselves that they were winners and everyone else was a loser. Tonight's entertainment was watching Marcus toy with the waitress, and he was very, very good at it. She was nobody after all. Just another desperate woman in a cheap uniform with worn-down shoes and tired eyes, serving people who made more money in an hour than she made in a year. Fair game for entertainment, fair game for humiliation, fair game for sport. What Marcus Thornton didn't know was that the woman standing in front of his table, holding a tray of dirty dessert plates and maintaining a professionally neutral expression, was worth $5.2 billion. 5 weeks earlier, Alexandra Chen had made a decision that her entire executive team thought was completely insane. She was going to walk away from her empire for 1 month and work as a waitress in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. "Alex, this is crazy," her CFO, Jennifer Liu, had said when Alexandra first proposed the idea. They were sitting in Alexandra's corner office on the 55th floor of Chen Tower, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. "You're the CEO of a $5 billion company. You can't just disappear for a month to play undercover boss." "I'm not playing anything," Alexandra had replied calmly. She was sitting at her desk, a massive piece of furniture made from reclaimed wood that had once been part of a 19th century ship. "I'm trying to understand something important. When was the last time I talked to someone who wasn't rich?" Jennifer had paused, thinking. "I don't know. Last week? You talked to that Uber driver, who immediately recognized me and spent the entire ride asking for business advice and an investment in his startup. That doesn't count. I mean, really talk to someone. Someone who doesn't know who I am. Someone who treats me like a normal person. Why does that matter? Because I'm making decisions that affect thousands of employees across dozens of companies, and I've realized that I have no idea what their lives are actually like. Everyone around me is either a C-suite executive making millions, or they're so intimidated by who I am that they won't tell me the truth. I'm living in a bubble, Jen, and I hate bubbles." Alexandra had stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I grew up poor, really poor. My mom was a seamstress. My dad worked 3 jobs. I know what it's like to struggle. But that was 20 years ago. I'm worried I've forgotten. I'm worried I've become one of those people who thinks money makes them better than everyone else. You're not like that, Alex. How do I know? When was the last time someone told me I was wrong? When was the last time someone challenged me? Everyone agrees with me because I'm the boss. I need perspective, real perspective, so I'm going undercover." And she had. Alexandra had spent 2 weeks preparing for her transformation. She created a complete fake identity with the help of a private investigator who specialized in creating background legends for undercover work. She became Alex Morgan, a 29-year-old struggling actress who waitressed to pay the bills. She had fake references, a fake apartment in Queens, a fake rental history, even a fake social media presence going back years. It would hold up to any employment background check. Then came the physical transformation, and this was harder than Alexandra had expected. Her hair, a distinctive auburn that had been featured in countless magazine photos, was dyed to a forgettable mousy brown. She got cheap contact lenses to replace her signature designer glasses that everyone in the business world recognized. She learned to walk differently, to take up less space, to make herself invisible in the way that service workers often had to. She bought her entire wardrobe at Target and H&M, no Chanel, no Prada, just cheap black pants and white shirts that didn't quite fit right. She practiced speaking with a less polished accent, letting her grammar slip slightly, using filler words like and that she had trained herself out of years ago in public speaking courses. When she looked in the mirror after the transformation was complete, she didn't see Alexandra Chen, Billionaire CEO. She saw Alex Morgan, nobody waitress. Perfect. Her first job was at the Sterling Room, one of Manhattan's most exclusive steakhouses. It catered to the ultra-wealthy, the kind of people who thought nothing of spending $2,000 on dinner. It was the perfect place to observe how the rich treated people they considered beneath them. Her first week had been an education. She learned that carrying heavy trays made her shoulders ache. She learned that standing for 8 hours in cheap shoes made her feet swell and blister. She learned that the smell of expensive food became nauseating when you couldn't afford to eat it yourself. She learned that people snapped their fingers at you like you were a dog, that they had conversations about you like you weren't standing right there, that they complained about the $20 tip on a $500 bill. But most importantly, she learned about the casual cruelty of the wealthy. She saw men grab waitresses' hips and laugh when the women tried to pull away. She saw diners send back perfect food just to watch the kitchen staff scramble. She saw people leave insulting tips with notes that said things like, "Maybe lose some weight," or "Smile more." By her second week, Alexandra was documenting everything. She started keeping a journal of the worst behavior she witnessed. And one name appeared in that journal more than any other: Marcus Thornton. Marcus came to the Sterling Room every Tuesday night at exactly 8 p.m. He always brought guests, always men, always wealthy, and he always treated the staff like absolute garbage. The first time Alexandra served his table, he had sent back a bottle of wine claiming it was corked when it was absolutely perfect. The sommelier, a man named Antoine who had trained in the finest restaurants in Paris, had been humiliated. The second time, Marcus had made a crude sexual comment about Alexandra's body loud enough for the entire table to hear, then laughed when she kept her face professionally neutral. The third time, he had reduced a young busboy named Carlos to tears by screaming at him for accidentally brushing against Marcus's chair. And the tips? God, the tips? Marcus would routinely leave $5 or $10 on bills that were $400 or $500. Sometimes he would leave nothing at all, with a note that said service was unsatisfactory even when the service had been perfect. Alexandra had watched this pattern for 3 weeks and she had come to a conclusion. Marcus Thornton was a bully. He used his wealth as a weapon to hurt people who couldn't fight back, and someone needed to stop him. So tonight, Alexandra had requested to work his table. Her manager, Gerald, had tried to talk her out of it. "Alex, Marcus Thornton is our most difficult customer. He's going to make your life hell. Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure," Alexandra had said with a smile. "I can handle Marcus Thornton." If only Gerald knew who he was really talking to. Marcus had already sent back 2 bottles of wine claiming they were corked when everyone at the table knew they were perfect. The first had been a 2010 Chateau Lafite Rothschild that cost $6,000. Antoine, the sommelier, had opened it at the table with trembling hands, his professional pride already wounded from previous encounters with Marcus. He had poured the tasting portion with perfect technique, the wine cascading into the glass with a soft gurgle. Marcus had barely glanced at it before waving it away. "Corked. Take it back." Antoine had tried to object, had tried to explain that he had personally inspected this bottle, that it had been stored at the perfect temperature and humidity, that it was impossible for it to be corked. But Marcus had simply stared at him with cold eyes until Antoine had taken the bottle away, his face burning with humiliation. The second bottle had been even worse. A 2015 Barolo that was absolutely exquisite, and Marcus had claimed it was off after taking a single sip. The entire table had watched this performance uncomfortably, but none of them had said anything, because that's what you did when you wanted to stay in Marcus Thornton's good graces. You kept your mouth shut and let him be a monster. Then he had made the waitress recite the specials 3 times. Alexandra had approached the table with practiced professionalism, her notepad ready, her smile polite but not overeager. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Alex, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Can I start you with some cocktails or wine while you look at the menu? Marcus hadn't even looked up. Tell us the specials. Alexandra had recited them perfectly. Tonight we're featuring a pan-seared Chilean sea bass with saffron risotto and grilled asparagus. We also have a 28-ounce bone-in ribeye with truffle butter and roasted fingerling potatoes. And for those interested in something lighter, we have a roasted duck breast with cherry gastrique and wild rice. Marcus had frowned. I didn't catch that. Say it again. Slower this time. Maybe try enunciating more clearly. Alexandra had repeated the specials, speaking exactly the same way she had the first time. Clear, professional, perfectly understandable. Still not getting it, Marcus had said with a smirk. One more time, and try not to mumble. The men at the table had chuckled nervously. They knew what Marcus was doing. He was testing her, seeing how much abuse she would take before she cracked. Alexandra had smiled and repeated the specials a third time. And then she had waited, her pen poised over her notepad, while Marcus had deliberately ignored her for a full 3 minutes, continuing his conversation about golf handicaps and yacht purchases while she stood there. Finally, he had waved her away without ordering. We need more time. Come back in 10 minutes. Now, with dessert finished and the 6th bottle of wine nearly empty, Marcus was ready for his grand finale. He had drunk just enough to feel invincible, but not so much that his words would slur. He was in the perfect state of euphoric cruelty. Alexandra approached to clear the dessert plates. Marcus watched her with predatory eyes. "Hey," Marcus said loudly, snapping his fingers to get her attention. The sharp sound cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. "Come here for a second. I have a question for you." Alexandra stopped. She turned to face him, her hands gripping the empty tray. Every instinct told her to walk away, to quit, to tell Marcus exactly where he could shove his question. But she stayed in character. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" Her voice was quiet, respectful, with just a hint of nervousness. Exactly what Alex Morgan, the waitress, would sound like. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed pulling wings off flies. "My friends and I were having a discussion about success, about what separates the winners from the losers in this world. And we realized we're all up here in our little bubble, right? We've all made our fortunes. We live in penthouses. We fly private. We don't really interact with regular people anymore." He gestured around the table at his friends. Bradley Hex, venture capitalist worth $200 million. Thomas Way, hedge fund manager worth $300 million. Robert Dalton, real estate developer worth $500 million. Jonathan Pierce, cryptocurrency entrepreneur worth who knows what. And Marcus himself worth an estimated $3.7 billion. "So I thought," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "why not get a ground-level perspective? Someone who actually has to work for a living. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle." The men at the table chuckled. They knew what was coming. This was Marcus being Marcus. Cruel for sport. Entertaining himself by making someone uncomfortable. "If you had my resources," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair and swirling the last of his wine. "My connections, my capital, let's say $300 million to invest. What would you do with it? How would you get rich?" He was grinning now, waiting for her to stammer. Waiting for her to say something stupid about buying lottery tickets or investing in whatever trending stock she'd heard about on TikTok or Reddit. Waiting to laugh at her. The whole table was watching, waiting for the punchline. But the waitress didn't stammer. She didn't look embarrassed or intimidated. Instead, she looked at Marcus Thornton, really looked at him, and something changed in her eyes. The submissive deference that had been there all night vanished, replaced by something that made Marcus's smile falter ever so slightly. It was the look of someone who knew something you didn't. The look of someone holding all the cards. Alexandra tilted her head slightly, considering the question as if it were actually serious, as if Marcus Thornton actually cared about her opinion. And then she spoke, her voice still quiet, but somehow carrying more weight now, more authority. "Well, sir," she said, "if I had $300 million to invest, the very first thing I would do is make absolutely certain that I was not about to waste it on acquiring data flow technologies." The table went completely silent. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Marcus's smile froze on his face like he'd been flash frozen. "What did you just say?" His voice came out strangled. Alexandra didn't flinch. She met his eyes with a calm, steady gaze that should have been impossible for a waitress facing down a billionaire. "Data flow technologies, the social media analytics company, the acquisition you're planning to close next Tuesday for $320 million. I would strongly advise against that investment." Marcus's friends were exchanging glances now. Confused, alarmed. How did a waitress at a steakhouse know about a confidential acquisition that hadn't even been publicly announced yet? "How do you—" Marcus started, but Alexandra wasn't finished. "Because their user metrics are completely fabricated. The 40 million monthly active users they're claiming? It's closer to 4 million, and most of those are bots. Their revenue stream from advertising? It's all from fraudulent click farms. The technology they claim to have developed in-house? They bought it from a bankrupt company in Estonia for $50,000 and rebranded it. And their CEO, Daniel Reeves?" Alexandra paused for effect. "He's currently under active SEC investigation for securities fraud. The announcement is going to drop in approximately 4 days, probably Monday or Tuesday. The stock will crater. And if you close this acquisition before that announcement, you'll lose every single penny of that $320 million. Not to mention the reputational damage and potential legal liability for not conducting proper due diligence. You could have heard a pin drop in that restaurant." Marcus Thornton stared at the waitress, his mouth slightly open, his champagne glass frozen halfway to the table. His face had gone from its usual confident tan to a pale, sickly grey. His friends looked at each other in growing panic. Bradley Hex was already reaching for his phone. "How—" Marcus's voice came out as barely a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "How do you know that?" It was a good question. An important question. Because the SEC investigation into data flow wasn't public. The details about the fraudulent metrics weren't public. This was insider information of the highest order. Information that should have been available only to federal investigators and Dataflow's own executives. Alexandra smiled. It was a small, professional smile, but there was something behind it. Knowledge, power, a secret. "I read, sir. I keep up with the news." The Wall Street Journal had a small piece buried in the business section last week about tech companies under federal investigation for inflated user metrics. Dataflow was mentioned, though not by name initially. But if you cross-reference the described revenue figures with publicly available S1 filings, it's pretty obvious which company they're talking about. It's all public information if you bother to look past the glossy marketing decks and press releases. That was a complete lie, and Alexandra knew it. The WSJ article was real, but it hadn't mentioned Dataflow by name or provided enough details to identify them. The real reason Alexandra knew about the SEC investigation was much simpler. One of her own companies had been contacted by the SEC as part of their research into fraudulent social media metrics. She had read the entire investigative file. She knew things that wouldn't be public for at least another week. But Marcus didn't need to know that. What Marcus needed to know was that he had been saved from making a catastrophic mistake. By a waitress. Marcus fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. He was dialing someone, his personal lawyer maybe, or his chief investment officer. One of his friends, Bradley Hex, the venture capitalist, was already frantically typing on his own device, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his screen. "Oh my God," Bradley whispered, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "There is an article. It's buried on page 14 of last Thursday's journal. Tech companies under investigation for fraudulent metrics. How did we miss this?" Thomas Way was on his phone now too, calling someone. Get me the data flow due diligence file, everything, right now. I don't care what time it is. Wake everyone up. We might have a problem. Robert Dalton was frantically Googling SEC investigation data flow technologies on his tablet. Jonathan Pierce had gone completely pale and was chugging his wine like it was water. Marcus was calling multiple people, his voice getting louder and more desperate with each call that went to voicemail. Frank, call me back immediately. We have a serious problem with data flow. I need you to... Jessica, I need the due diligence report on data flow. The actual report, not the executive summary. There might be... Chen, wake up. I need you to verify something. Data flow's user metrics, are they... He was spiraling. Alexandra could see it happening in real time. The confident, cruel billionaire was transforming into a panicked man who had just realized he'd been about to make the worst business decision of his life. The waitress set down her tray and looked at Marcus one more time. If you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have other tables to attend to. I hope you found my perspective helpful. Enjoy the rest of your evening. She turned and walked away, her sensible shoes making soft, confident sounds on the polished floor, leaving Marcus Thornton and his table of billionaires sitting in shocked, terrified silence. As she walked back to the kitchen, Alexandra allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Phase 1 complete. 4 days later, the news exploded across every financial channel. Dataflow Technologies CEO arrested for securities fraud. Company's user base fabricated. Revenue streams non-existent. Stock in free fall. Marcus Thornton's planned acquisition halted pending investigation. Marcus woke up to 217 missed calls. His phone was vibrating off his nightstand. His inbox was flooded with emails from board members, investors, lawyers, all asking the same question. How did you almost lose $300 million? But Marcus had only one question. Who was that waitress? He called the Sterling Room at 6 in the morning before they were even open. The manager, a man named Gerald Finch, answered sounding exhausted. Sterling Room. This is Marcus Thornton. I need to know about one of your servers, the one who worked my table on Tuesday night. Dark hair, mid-30s. I need her full name, contact information, employment records, everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Thornton, we don't typically give out employee information. I don't care what you typically do. That woman saved me from making the worst business decision of my life. I need to find her, now. Another pause. Let me check the schedule and her personnel file. I'll call you back. 20 minutes later, Gerald called back. His voice was confused, uncertain. Mr. Thornton, this is very strange. I checked the schedule. I checked our payroll system. I checked everything. There's no record of anyone matching that description working here that night. That's impossible. I saw her. My entire table saw her. I know, sir. But her time card is gone. Her W-4 forms are missing. It's like she was never here. The only thing I found was a name on a handwritten schedule from 3 weeks ago. Alex Morgan. But there's nothing else. No address, no social security number, nothing. Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't a waitress. This was someone else. Someone with resources. Someone who had deliberately infiltrated his world. But who? And why? Meanwhile, 55 floors above the city in the Chen Tower, Alexandra Chen sat in her real office, dressed in her real clothes, a Chanel suit that cost more than most cars, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Her assistant, a sharp woman named Jennifer Liu, walked in carrying a tablet. The data flow story just broke. Marcus Thornton is all over the news. His credibility is taking a massive hit. Investors are questioning his judgment. Alexandra smiled. Good. What about our position in Thornton Industries? We're up to 14.7% now. We've been quietly buying shares through shell companies for the past 6 months. We're his second largest shareholder after himself. Perfect. Schedule an emergency shareholder meeting. Cite concerns about leadership and fiduciary responsibility. I want it on the books for next Monday. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You're really going through with this? Marcus Thornton needs to learn a very important lesson. Money doesn't make you better than other people, and the person serving your dinner might be the person who ends up owning your company. Alexandra had started her undercover experiment 5 weeks ago. She had been feeling disconnected from reality, isolated in her ivory tower of wealth and success. She wanted to understand what it was really like to work a service job, to be treated as invisible by the wealthy elite. So she had created a fake identity, dyed her hair, bought clothes from Target, and become Alex Morgan, struggling waitress. The first week had been eye-opening. The second week had been infuriating. By the third week, she was documenting everything. The harassment, the condescension, the casual cruelty. And Marcus Thornton had been the absolute worst of them all. She had watched him berate a young busboy until the kid was in tears. She had watched him make sexual comments to female servers. She had watched him leave insulting tips just to flex his power. Marcus Thornton was a bully who used his money as a weapon, and Alexandra was about to disarm him. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m. in the Thornton Industries boardroom on the 40th floor of the Thornton Tower. Marcus walked in expecting a routine discussion about quarterly earnings and perhaps some questions about the data flow situation, which his PR team had been working overtime to manage. Instead, he found the boardroom transformed. Instead of the usual 10 people, there were at least 30. Lawyers, investment bankers, board members he hadn't seen in years, and most unsettling of all, a woman he didn't recognize sitting at the head of the table, in his chair. She was striking in a way that commanded attention without trying. Auburn hair pulled back in a sleek French twist. Designer glasses that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. A charcoal Armani suit that screamed power and money. She was reviewing documents on a tablet, her expression focused and calm. When Marcus entered, she looked up and smiled. It was a warm smile, but it carried an edge of steel that made Marcus's skin prickle. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice pleasant, but carrying a tone of absolute authority. "Thank you for joining us. Please, have a seat." She gestured to a chair halfway down the table. Not at the head, halfway down, like he was just another board member. Marcus stopped in the doorway. He looked around the room. His CFO, David Chen, was there, looking extremely uncomfortable. His head lawyer, Frank Morrison, was there, looking grim. His board members were all there, studiously avoiding eye contact. Something was very, very wrong. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded. "And why are you sitting in my chair?" The woman stood gracefully and extended her hand. "Alexandra Chen, CEO of Chen Enterprises. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I officially own 14.73% of Thornton Industries stock, making me your largest shareholder after yourself. Which means, Mr. Thornton, this is as much my chair as it is yours. Now please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Marcus felt like he'd been physically struck. Alexandra Chen. The Alexandra Chen. He knew that name. Everyone in the business world knew that name. She was a legend, self-made billionaire. Started with nothing, built an empire. One of the richest women in the world. Forbes estimated her net worth at somewhere north of $5 billion. What was she doing in his boardroom? And why had she bought into his company? "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice coming out weaker than he intended. "Why would you buy into Thornton Industries? This doesn't make any sense." Alexandra's smile widened slightly. There was something familiar about that smile. Something that made Marcus's brain itch with recognition. "Because 3 weeks ago, you asked me a very interesting question, Mr. Thornton. You asked me what I would do if I had your resources. And I'm here to show you." And then Marcus saw it. The way she tilted her head slightly when she spoke. The calm, analytical look in her eyes. The quiet confidence in her voice. The smile that suggested she knew something you didn't. "No," Marcus whispered. His face went white. "No. You're the waitress." Actually, Alexandra said, sitting back down and steepling her fingers, I'm Alexandra Chen. The waitress was just a character I played for 1 month to conduct a social experiment. I wanted to understand how people at the highest levels of wealth and power treat people they perceive as beneath them. I wanted to see if the ultra-rich had any empathy left, or if money had completely eroded their humanity. And you, Marcus, you were my primary case study. Marcus collapsed into the chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. His mind was reeling. You, you did all this just to mess with me? You infiltrated my restaurant? You... I did this because you're a bully, Alexandra interrupted, her voice cutting like a blade. You treat service workers like garbage. You harass women. You humiliate people for entertainment. You use your wealth as a weapon to hurt people who can't fight back. And I decided that someone needed to teach you that actions have consequences. She pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the polished table toward Marcus. Inside that folder is documentation of every sexual harassment complaint ever filed against you that your lawyers may disappear with NDAs and settlements. Every labor law violation your company has committed. Every contract that you've breached. Every shady deal you've made. Every lie you've told to investors. I've spent the last 6 months compiling this, Marcus. I have testimonies from 43 former employees. I have emails. I have recordings. I have financial documents. And if you don't do exactly what I tell you to do, I'm going to release all of it to the press, the SEC, and the FBI. Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands. Page after page of evidence. Things he thought were buried and forgotten. Things he thought were protected by teams of lawyers and millions in settlement money. Emails he'd written when he was drunk and angry. Photos from company parties where his behavior was clearly inappropriate. Financial statements that showed creative accounting that crossed legal lines. Testimony from people he'd destroyed professionally and personally. What do you want from me? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He felt small, exposed, terrified. Alexandra leaned forward. I want you to change. Completely. Here's what's going to happen, and these are non-negotiable terms. First, you're going to step down as CEO of Thornton Industries effective immediately. You'll move to a chairman role, but someone else will handle day-to-day operations. Someone who actually treats people with dignity and respect. Your CFO, David Chen, will take over as interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement. Second, you're going to implement a comprehensive company-wide ethics and sensitivity training program. Mandatory for everyone from the CEO to the janitors. You'll be the first one to complete it. Third, you're going to establish a $10 million fund specifically to support service industry workers. Education grants, legal defense funds, mental health services, whatever they need. You'll have no control over how it's distributed. An independent board will manage it. Fourth, you're going to personally apologize face-to-face to every single person you've ever mistreated, harassed, or bullied. And I have a comprehensive list. It's 73 people long. You'll schedule meetings with each one, on their terms, at their convenience, and you'll apologize sincerely. No excuses, no justifications, just apologies. Fifth, and this is the most important one, you're going to spend 1 month working as a regular hourly employee at minimum wage in one of your own company's facilities. You'll clock in, you'll follow orders, you'll do the work. I want you to understand viscerally what it's like to be on the other side of your policies. The room was completely silent. Marcus looked around at the faces staring at him. His board members wouldn't meet his eyes. And if I refuse any of this? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Then I use my nearly 15% stake to call for your immediate removal as both CEO and chairman. I release all of this documentation publicly. Your company's stock will crash. Your reputation will be destroyed. You'll face criminal investigations and dozens of lawsuits. Your board will vote you out to try to salvage the company. And you'll spend the rest of your life fighting legal battles instead of running a business. Your choice, Marcus. change or die. Professionally speaking, Marcus stared at the folder in front of him. He thought about fighting. He thought about calling his lawyers, his PR team, his powerful friends. But he looked at Alexandra Chen, at the steel in her eyes and the evidence in her hands, and he knew he had no choice. She had beaten him completely. "I'll do it," Marcus said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "All of it." "Excellent." Alexandra stood and buttoned her suit jacket. "Your first day as an hourly employee starts this coming Monday. You'll be working at the Thornton Industries warehouse facility in Newark, New Jersey. The facility manager's name is Mike Patterson. He's been with your company for 17 years. He's going to be your direct supervisor. You'll report to him at 7 a.m. sharp. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty. Don't be late. Hourly employees get written up for tardiness." She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and Marcus, that waitress you humiliated? That busboy you made cry? That server you stiffed on a tip? Any one of them could be the next person who ends up owning a piece of your company. Treat people with respect. Not because you're afraid of consequences, but because it's the right thing to do. Learn that lesson, and maybe you'll actually become the success you pretend to be." She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Marcus sat in the boardroom surrounded by his board and his lawyers, feeling smaller and more powerless than he had ever felt in his entire life. 4 weeks later, Marcus Thornton stood in a massive warehouse in Newark, New Jersey, wearing a reflective safety vest that was 2 sizes too big and steel-toed boots that were giving him blisters. His hands, which had never done manual labor in his life, were covered in band-aids and developing calluses. His back ached from lifting boxes. His shoulders burned from repetitive motion. His feet hurt from standing on hard concrete for 8 hours straight. He was making $12 an hour, $480 for a 40-hour week, before taxes, less than he used to spend on a single lunch. The other warehouse workers treated him with a mixture of contempt and schadenfreude. They knew who he really was. They knew he was the billionaire CEO who had made their jobs harder, who had rejected their requests for better safety equipment, who had fought against their attempts to unionize, who had cut their benefits and frozen their wages while giving himself massive bonuses. Now, he was one of them, and they made sure he knew it. His supervisor, Mike Patterson, was a gruff man in his 50s with a grey beard and permanent scowl lines around his eyes. Mike had worked at Thornton Industries for 17 years. He had 3 kids in college, he had a mortgage, he had medical bills from his wife's cancer treatment, and he had 0 patience for billionaires. "Thornton," Mike barked on Marcus's 4th day. "You're on box line 3. We've got a shipment of server components that needs to go out by 5. I need you to scan, pack, and label. Think you can handle that, or is it too complicated for a CEO?" "I can handle it, sir," Marcus said. The "sir" still felt strange in his mouth, addressing someone he would have considered beneath him a month ago. "Don't call me sir. I'm not a sir. I'm Mike, and you're late. Box line 3. Now." Marcus hustled to his station. He spent the next 6 hours scanning boxes with a handheld device, packing them with bubble wrap and packing peanuts, taping them shut and sticking on shipping labels. It was mind-numbing work, repetitive, exhausting. By hour 4, his hands were cramping. By hour 6, his back was screaming. During his 15-minute break, Marcus sat on a concrete block outside the loading dock, eating a peanut butter sandwich he'd packed from home because he couldn't afford to buy lunch from the vending machines on his current salary. Another worker, a young woman named Maria, who had been with the company for 3 years, sat down near him. "You look like hell," Maria said, not unkindly. "I feel like hell," Marcus admitted. "How do you do this? Every day?" Maria shrugged. "You get used to it. Your body adapts." "But yeah, it's hard. The pay is shit. The benefits are worse. We asked for better conditions last year. Better wages, better safety equipment, maybe some ergonomic chairs in the break room. You know what management said?" Marcus shook his head, though he could guess. They said the company couldn't afford it. said we needed to tighten our belts. That same year, you gave yourself a $20 million bonus. Marcus felt shame wash over him like a wave. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, sorry doesn't pay my rent. But hey, at least you're here now. Maybe you'll actually see what it's like. On his last day at the warehouse, Mike pulled Marcus aside. So, your month is up. You going back to your penthouse and your private jet? Yeah, Marcus said. But I'm going to change things. The wages, the benefits, the working conditions. I promise. Mike looked at him with skeptical eyes that had seen too many broken promises. We'll see, Thornton. Actions matter more than words. You want to prove you've changed? Prove it, don't just talk about it. Marcus went back to being chairman. But something fundamental had shifted inside him. He had experienced for just 1 month what it was like to worry about money, to have your body hurt from work, to be treated as disposable. The first thing he did was approve across-the-board wage increases for all hourly employees. 20% raise, effective immediately. Then he improved the health benefits, added dental and vision, reduced deductibles, made mental health coverage more accessible. Then he invested in better equipment, ergonomic workstations, better safety gear, more frequent breaks. He fired 3 middle managers who had histories of treating workers poorly. He created an anonymous hotline for reporting harassment and abuse. He actually started listening when workers raised concerns. And slowly, over months, the culture of Thornton Industries began to change. 6 months after the shareholder meeting, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. A simple card, expensive paper, elegant script. Dinner at the Sterling Room. Monday at 8 p.m. Table for 2. Alexandra Chen. Marcus arrived early, nervous in a way he hadn't felt in years. Alexandra was already there, sitting in one of the private dining rooms. She was dressed casually, relatively speaking, in slacks and a silk blouse, instead of one of her power suits. Marcus, she said, standing to shake his hand. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Marcus replied, though I'm a little confused why. I wanted to see if you've actually changed, or if you were just putting on a show to save your company. They sat. Alexandra studied him across the table. I've been watching, you know. The wage increases, the benefits improvements, the management changes, the hotline, the safety equipment. Are you impressed or disappointed? Marcus asked. Honestly, a little of both. Impressed that you actually followed through. Disappointed that it took public humiliation and the threat of losing everything to make you do what you should have done anyway. Marcus nodded. That's fair. I was a terrible person. I used my money and power to hurt people. I don't have an excuse. I can only try to be better. The waitress approached their table. She was young, maybe 23, with nervous eyes. Good evening. My name is Emily. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink? Marcus smiled at her genuinely. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate your service. What would you recommend? What's your favorite wine here? Emily looked surprised, then pleased. I actually really like the Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley. It's not the most expensive, but it's really smooth and has nice cherry notes. That sounds perfect. We'll take a bottle, please. And Emily, take your time. We're not in a rush. After Emily left, Alexandra raised an eyebrow. Well, that was different from the Marcus Thornton I observed 3 weeks ago. I learned some things, important things, about empathy, about respect, about the fact that everyone is a person with their own struggles and dreams, regardless of their job or their bank account. They ordered dinner, they talked. Marcus asked Alexandra about her own journey, her own company, her own philosophy of business. I believe that a company is only as good as how it treats its most vulnerable employees, Alexandra said. If you take care of people at the bottom, they'll take care of everything above them. But if you abuse them, exploit them, treat them as disposable, the whole structure becomes rotten. I wish someone had taught me that 20 years ago, Marcus said. Would you have listened? Alexandra asked. Marcus thought about it honestly. Probably not. I was too arrogant, too focused on winning. I needed to lose. I needed to be humiliated. I needed to feel powerless. It was the only way I could learn. When the check came, Marcus left Emily a tip that was 5 times the cost of the entire meal. As they walked out together, Alexandra said, "You're going to be okay, Marcus. You made terrible mistakes, but you owned them. You changed. That's rare." "I had a very effective teacher," Marcus said, looking at her. "A teacher who happened to be serving me wine while I was being a complete asshole." Alexandra laughed. The best lessons often come from the most unexpected places. 3 months later, Marcus Thornton published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled "What I Learned Working for Minimum Wage: A Billionaire's Journey from Arrogance to Empathy." In it, he detailed his experience working in his own warehouse. He wrote about the physical pain, the financial stress, the feeling of being invisible and unappreciated. He wrote about the workers he'd met, their stories, their struggles. And he wrote about how fundamentally wrong he'd been about almost everything. The piece went viral. It was shared millions of times. It sparked a national conversation about income inequality, workers' rights, and corporate responsibility. Marcus received thousands of messages. Some were supportive. Many were angry, saying he didn't deserve redemption, that 1 month of minimum wage work didn't erase years of cruelty. And Marcus agreed with them. He didn't deserve easy forgiveness. But he could work to be better. He partnered with Alexandra to launch a nationwide program supporting service industry workers. Education grants, legal defense funds, mental health services. They called it the Second Chance Initiative, because everyone deserved a second chance, even billionaires who had been assholes. And he never, ever forgot the night a waitress changed his entire life by giving him an answer that shattered his world and rebuilt it into something better. Because sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the person who will save you from yourself. The end. If you enjoyed this story of karma, justice, and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories every single day. Comment below. Would you have given Marcus a second chance, or was he beyond redemption? Thanks for watching, and remember the most important lesson. Treat everyone with respect and dignity, because you never know who you're really talking to. The person serving your coffee today might be the person signing your paycheck tomorrow. See you in the next story.